My mother-in-law announced I was not family at Thanksgiving, so I pulled out her texts begging me for money and read them in front of everyone. I'm 29, my husband Evan is 31, we've been married a little over a year, together for 4, we live about 40 minutes from his parents, close enough that holidays are always at their house unless someone is sick or out of town. Evan's mom, Marlene, has never liked me. She's polite on the surface, the kind of polite that stays in the safe zone. She'll ask if I want more water and then act like she didn't hear me answer. She'll compliment my earrings but never say my name. She'll tell people Evan is doing so well and leave out the part where we're a unit. The first year I dated Evan, I told myself she needed time. Second year I told myself she was stressed. By the time we got engaged I stopped trying to decode it. It was always some variation of the same thing. I wasn't the woman she imagined for her son. I wasn't from the right kind of family in her head. My job wasn't impressive enough to brag about. My parents didn't have the right kind of house. I didn't dress the way she wanted. I didn't laugh at the things she wanted me to laugh at. Evan saw it. He just didn't want to fight his mom about it every week. He'd say, she's like that with everyone, or, she'll come around, or, just ignore her. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't blind, he was tired, and he had been trained his whole life to keep her calm. The part that made it complicated, the part that made me keep showing up and smiling, was that Marlene also came to me when she needed something. Not publicly, not with witnesses, always privately, always late at night, always with some reason that made it sound temporary. It started small. 3 years ago when Evan and I were still dating, she texted me directly instead of Evan. She said she had a payment due and her bank app was locked. She said she just needed to borrow $200 until her paycheck hit. She said she felt embarrassed asking her son. She said she didn't want him worrying about her. I sent it. It was $200. It wasn't going to break me, and it felt like a chance to build something. 2 weeks later she paid me back and sent a bunch of heart emojis, which was the most warmth she'd ever sent me. Then she went right back to acting like I was a guest she tolerated. After that it kept happening, not every month, but often enough that I noticed a pattern, a few hundred here, 600 there, one time 1,200, always right before a holiday or right after some shopping event, always with a story that had too many details. She'd say a tire blew out and she had to replace 2. She'd say her friend's daughter needed help with a deposit and she was going to be paid back. She'd say her card got compromised and the bank froze the account and she couldn't access cash. She'd say she had to cover something for Evan's younger sister and she didn't want Evan thinking his sister was struggling. I asked Evan once, gently, if his mom was having money issues, and his face tightened and he said, she's always had money drama, just ignore it, do not send her anything without telling me. I told him I already had sent her money before. He got quiet, then said, how much? I gave him a rough number, and his jaw clenched. Then he said, I'll handle it, and the next day he told me he spoke to her and she promised she'd stop involving me. 2 months later she texted me again. She said Evan was stressed and she didn't want to add to it. She said she trusted me. She said I was responsible. She said she didn't know who else to ask. I told myself it was easier to just solve it than to trigger a family explosion, and I also told myself that if I said no she'd take it out on me anyway, so I kept sending money, and I kept screenshots, because it started to feel less like kindness and more like insurance. Evan and I got married last year, small wedding, not because we couldn't have done bigger, but because we didn't want a production. Marlene hated that. She wanted the big venue and the big guest list and the photos she could show off. She offered to pay for upgrades. Then when we didn't accept, she told people I was controlling and I didn't let Evan have the wedding his mother dreamed of. After the wedding, her texts got more intense. She stopped asking for $200 and started asking for $2,000. She framed it like a loan, and she always promised a repayment date. Then she'd miss it and text me long paragraphs about why she couldn't pay it yet. I told her I couldn't keep doing it. She'd respond with something like, I understand, sweetie, and then 2 weeks later she'd be back with a new emergency. This summer she asked me for $4,500. She said Evan's dad was behind on something important and she couldn't tell Evan because it would hurt him. She said she was trying to protect her family. I said no. I told her we were saving, and we had our own bills, and I wasn't comfortable sending that kind of money without Evan knowing. She didn't answer for 2 days. Then she sent a message that made my stomach drop. She said, you're part of this family now. You should act like it. I showed Evan, and he finally got angry in a way I hadn't seen about her before. He called her, they argued. He came back into the room and said, she's not getting another cent from us, ever, and if she contacts you again, you tell me immediately. I thought that would be the end. Then Thanksgiving came. We were supposed to go to his parents' house at 2 p.m., dinner at 4, dessert, then leave by 7 because I had work early the next day. I baked pie the night before. Evan picked up wine on the way, normal stuff. We got there and the house was full. Evan's dad, Keith, was already watching football. His sister Lila and her boyfriend were on the couch, 2 aunts, a cousin, Marlene's friend Denise, and Denise's adult son who I'd met once. The energy felt off, not loud off, more like people were waiting for something. Marlene hugged Evan, kissed his cheek, then looked at me and said, "Oh, you made it." I handed her the pie and said Happy Thanksgiving. She took it without looking at it, then walked away mid-sentence. I followed Evan into the living room and sat on the edge of an armchair, trying to be pleasant. Everyone made small talk, and Marlene stayed busy in the kitchen, loudly busy, like every cabinet needed to slam. When we sat down to eat, Marlene did that thing where she assigns seats like it's a power move. She put Evan at the head of the table near her. She put me at the far end next to Denise's son. She put Lila next to Evan. She put Keith on the other end like a guest in his own house. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be the person who caused a scene at Thanksgiving. Halfway through the meal, Keith tried to make a toast. He lifted his glass and started saying something about being grateful. Marlene interrupted him to fix the centerpiece. Then she started her own speech. She said she wanted to thank everyone who came. She said family is everything. She said blood is what holds you together when life gets hard. And she said it while looking straight at me. Then she said, "And I know we have some people at the table who aren't actually family, but we're gracious, and we welcome guests, so let's be thankful for that too." The table went silent in that thick way, not shocked yelling silence, uncomfortable silence. Evan froze, Lila stared at her plate, Keith's face tightened, Denise's eyes went wide, and Marlene sat there smiling like she'd landed a joke. I said, "What?" Marlene tilted her head and said, "You heard me. I'm just being honest. Family is family, and some people are just, here." Evan finally said, "Mom, stop." Marlene put her hand on his forearm and said, "Honey, I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just saying words mean things. Family is blood, and I'm tired of pretending." I felt my face get hot, and my chest got tight, and for a second I considered just standing up and leaving, but then I saw the way she was watching me, like she wanted me to shrink, like she wanted me to feel embarrassed enough to sit quietly. And I thought about every time she texted me, every time she called me sweetie, every time she said she trusted me, every time she said she was protecting Evan, all of it while she was deciding I wasn't family. So I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Evan looked at me like he knew something was about to happen and he didn't know how big it was going to be. Marlene said, "What are you doing?" I said, "You just said I'm not family, so I want to clarify something in front of everyone." Keith said my name softly, like a warning, like a plea, but he didn't tell me to stop. I unlocked my phone, opened my messages, scrolled to Marlene's thread, and held the screen in my lap. My hands weren't shaking, my voice was steady, which surprised me. I said, "Marlene, can you confirm this is your number?" She snapped, "Yes, why?" I said okay, and I started reading. I read the one where she asked for $600 because her card got locked and she needed groceries, and she promised to pay me back Friday. I read the one where she asked for $1,200 because she said Keith's payroll deposit didn't go through and she needed to cover a bill, and she said please don't tell Evan, he worries too much. I read the one from last winter where she asked for $2,000 and said it was for Lila's tuition payment, and she said, "You're the only one I can trust with this. I knew I could count on you. You're basically like a daughter to me." Marlene made a sound, like a short laugh that didn't match her face, and she said, "Stop, this is private." I said, "You made it public when you said I wasn't family at your own table." Evan said, "Mom, you asked her for money." Marlene stared at him and said, "No I didn't. She's twisting things. She likes attention." I scrolled and said, "Here's another one," and I read it exactly. Marlene wrote, "I hate to ask but I'm desperate. I'll pay you back when the refund hits. Please, your family, and I can't ask Evan, he'll judge me." Denise whispered, "Oh my." Keith pushed his chair back slightly, not leaving, just shifting like he needed space. Marlene's face went red, then pale, then red again. She said, "How dare you? You're humiliating me." I said, "You humiliated me first, and you also used me, and I want everyone to understand why I'm done." I opened my banking app and read out the amounts I sent, not totals, just a few, $600 on May 3rd, $1,200 on July 19th, $2,000 on December 12th. I said, "These weren't gifts, these were loans, and you promised repayment dates." Marlene slammed her napkin down and said, "You didn't have to send anything, that was your choice. If you wanted to help, you help, you don't keep receipts like a lawyer." I said, "I kept receipts because you kept asking, and you kept saying the same line, 'Don't tell Evan,' and I think everyone here knows why now." Evan stood up, slow, controlled, and he said, "Mom, apologize." Marlene looked at him like she didn't recognize him, then she looked around the table like she expected backup. Nobody spoke. Keith said, "Marlene, what is going on with the money?" Marlene shot him a look and said, "Not now." Keith said, "It's now." Lila finally said, "Mom, you said you needed money for me." Marlene turned to her and said, "I did, you don't know everything." Lila said, "I never asked you for money, I paid my tuition myself." Marlene's mouth opened, closed, and she looked at me like she wanted to burn a hole through me. Evan said, we're leaving, and you're not contacting my wife again, ever, and if you owe her money, you're paying it back, and he looked at Keith and said, Dad, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Keith didn't answer, his eyes were on Marlene. I stood up and grabbed my purse, I didn't touch my plate, I didn't pack the pie back up, I just walked out with Evan, and behind us I heard Marlene say, don't you walk out on me, after all I've done for you. Evan didn't turn around. In the car he kept one hand on the wheel and one hand clenched. He said, how much did she take from you? I told him the number, and he went quiet, then he said, I'm going to fix this. I said, no, I'm going to fix it, you can support me, but I'm not being dragged into another family argument where I end up the villain. I want it documented, I want it clean, I want it done. Evan nodded, and he said okay, tell me what you need. When we got home, I forwarded Evan the full message thread, and I started a folder, screenshots, transfers, dates, everything, not for drama, for clarity. I also typed one text to Marlene, one text only, do not contact me again for any reason. If you need to discuss repayment, contact Evan. She replied within seconds, you're dead to me. I didn't respond. Update, 10 hours later. I woke up to 10 missed calls from Keith, 3 from Lila, and a long text from Denise. Denise said she was sorry. She said she had no idea Marlene was doing that. She said the way Marlene spoke to me was cruel, and she said she didn't blame me for reading the texts. She said it was the only time she'd seen someone stand up to Marlene and not get steamrolled. Keith called again and Evan answered on speaker. Keith sounded exhausted. He said, Marlene has been borrowing money from multiple people, not just you. She's behind on credit cards. She took out a personal loan. She's been hiding statements, and she's been lying about what the money is for. Evan asked him what it was for. Keith said he didn't know yet, but he found casino cash withdrawal receipts in her glove box, and he found a stack of unopened bills in a drawer. Evan asked if Marlene was safe, like if she was spiraling. Keith said she was angry, not unsafe. He said she locked herself in the bedroom all night and kept saying I ruined Thanksgiving. He said she was telling Lila that I was manipulating everyone. Lila texted me. She said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. She said, she's been using my name to get money from people, and she asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet Lila for coffee the next day. Evan and I went together. Lila showed us her own messages from Marlene, a bunch of guilt-heavy stuff, things like, after everything I sacrificed, you can't even do this one thing, and, don't make me beg, and, family helps family. Lila said she'd been sending small amounts but stopped months ago. Marlene apparently decided I was easier. Keith texted Evan later. He said he wanted to pay me back himself because he was embarrassed. Evan asked if Keith had access to the accounts, and Keith said yes, but Marlene would notice money moving. I told Evan I didn't want Keith secretly paying me. I wanted Marlene to acknowledge it, not for revenge, for boundaries, because if she never admits what she did, she'll just rewrite it as me stealing from her, or me making it up. That afternoon Marlene texted Evan, not me. She said, your wife humiliated me. She's not welcome in my home, and she's not getting a dime from me. I never asked her for anything, she offered, because she's desperate to be liked. Evan replied with one sentence, we have the screenshots, you will repay her, and you will apologize, or we will handle it legally. Marlene responded, you wouldn't dare. Evan didn't answer again. That night Keith called Evan and said, I'm meeting with a financial counselor Monday, and I'm going to insist Marlene attends. He said he also scheduled a meeting with their bank because he didn't trust what he was seeing. He said he loved his wife, but he wasn't going to let her burn everything down and blame me. I didn't message Marlene again. I didn't post on social media. I didn't call relatives. I let the silence do its job. Update, 2 months later. Marlene signed a promissory note, not because she suddenly became reasonable, but because Keith forced the situation into daylight. Keith invited Evan and me to meet at a coffee shop near their house, neutral location. He said Marlene agreed to come. He said he wouldn't do it at the house because he didn't want another locked door situation or another scene. Marlene showed up wearing her nicest coat and the tight smile she saves for people she wants to impress. She didn't sit at first. She just stood there and said, I'm only here because Keith is making me. Keith said, sit down. She sat. Keith slid a paper across the table. He had written out the amounts she borrowed from me, with dates, and repayment terms, and it included a deadline for the full balance, plus a clause that if she missed 2 payments, the whole balance would become due immediately. Marlene stared at it and said, I'm not signing that. Keith said, then I'm moving my paycheck into a separate account and freezing our joint cards, and you can explain to everyone why you can't pay for anything. Marlene looked at Evan like she expected him to intervene. Evan didn't move. She looked at me and said, are you happy now? I said, I want my money back, and I want you to stop contacting me, that's all. She said, you should have come to me privately. I said, I sat at your table and you said I wasn't family, you made it public, you can handle the consequences in public too. Keith pushed a pen toward her. Marlene signed, hard strokes, like the paper was the enemy. Then she said, I'm not apologizing to her. Keith said, then you don't get holidays with Evan, and you don't get access to grandkids if they have them, and you don't get to pretend this didn't happen. You can choose pride or you can choose your family, but you're not getting both. Marlene's face shifted, she looked at Evan, then down at the table, then she said, I'm sorry for what I said at Thanksgiving. I waited. She added, I shouldn't have said you weren't family. I nodded once. Evan told her, you don't contact her directly again, not texts, not calls, nothing. If you need something you talk to me, and the answer will be no. Marlene didn't respond, she just stared at her coffee like it was suddenly interesting. Keith has been sending payments every 2 weeks from an account Marlene can't touch without him. The money is arriving, on schedule. Evan and I skipped Christmas at their house. We spent it with my parents. No drama, no speeches, no assigned seating. Keith came by our place one afternoon alone to drop off a small gift and to tell Evan he was starting couples counseling with Marlene. He didn't ask me to forgive her. He didn't ask me to come over. He just said he was trying to stabilize his life and he was sorry I got pulled into their mess. Marlene hasn't contacted me since the promissory note meeting. She hasn't tried to send a fake apology text. She hasn't tried to poke at me through Lila. She's quiet, and that quiet is fine. At the next family gathering we attend, if Marlene calls me not family again, the folder is still on my phone, but it won't get opened, because the money is being repaid, the boundary is set, and the only thing that happens now is distance, and that's the resolution she earned.